The green line, you can see it over here, this green line, that's the amount of reserves that banks are required to hold. And in almost all cases, that the amount of reserves that banks have and the amount of reserves that they hold are about the same. You can see in this graph, you can't tell the difference. There are little wiggles in there, but you can't see in this graph. Okay? And if the Fed wants to lower short-term interest rates at a particular point in time, all it used to have to do is just increase those reserves a little bit above required reserves, and short-term interest rates, the federal funds rate, would plummet. We've never had anything like it. We have got excess reserves in the banking system right now that exceed $1 trillion. And everybody's asking, is that have potential inflationary threats to the economy? And the answer is that it has potential effects. I personally still don't believe that it will lead to significant inflation in the United States, because there are a sufficient number of inflationary hawks on the open market committee of the Federal Reserve Bank that they're not going to let that happen. But in order to keep that from creating inflation, it means that all of that reserves, all of those excess reserves, have got to be pulled out of the banking system. Sooner or later. Tomorrow, not likely. This summer, not likely. But it's coming. And when it comes, you need to think of the implications of it. This is $1 trillion. These reserves are being held. I saw recently a wonderful diagram that I didn't have time enough to put together that showed what these reserves are. These reserves stem from the time when the Federal Reserve was buying mortgage-backed securities. It stems from the time when they were actually buying corporate securities as well. They've pretty much gotten out of that now. It stems from the time, and they're continuing to do it. As you know, QE2, the Fed announced that it was going to buy $600 billion more, $600 billion more of longer-term federal treasuries. All of that has got to be dumped back into the private market, sooner or later. Now here comes the recovery, starting to get momentum in 2011, starting to get even a little bit stronger in 2012, and the Fed now says it's time to move towards a more normal monetary policy. That is going to be one incredible trick to get over $1 trillion. And by the time they finish the QE2 expenditures, we could see 1.2, 1.4 trillion dollars that they have to dump in the marketplace. $1.4 trillion they're going to have to dump in the marketplace at the time your federal government has told you that the deficit this year is going to be 1.5 trillion, and that even next year, fiscal year 2012, it's going to be $1.1 trillion. So we've got the federal government borrowing $1.1 trillion, and now we've got the Federal Reserve having to dump $1.4 trillion into the private sector. That's going to be painful. My wife and I didn't need it. We were sorely tempted. We ran across a home. We went to a wedding last summer, and we ran across a home in Logan, Utah, that we just absolutely loved. It was a beautiful, beautiful home. And it was, well, to make a long story short, it had a kitchen that was about the size of our downstairs in our Houston home. And my wife has always lived with a small kitchen, and so, you know, here I am, here like, I owe it to her. But it wasn't really the kitchen that got me into it. What got me interested in this home, besides the fact it was a lovely home, the guy had spent, it was a speculator who had tried to flip this property and he had tried to, and he had pumped in $85,000 worth of landscaping. The landscaping was marvelous, and I was tempted. But why I was really tempted is because we went back for a second time to look at the home in early September, and guess what I could have bought? Guess what I could have got a mortgage on that home for? 30-year fixed rate mortgage for 3.78%. Wow. And I knew that would last. And that's one of the few things I've gotten right this year. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in 2012? The economy is starting to get some steam. The Fed decides it's got to pull in the reins, and it's dumping $1.4 trillion of this debt back in the market to get excess reserves under control. At the same time that the federal government is borrowing $1.1 trillion because it still hasn't balanced the budget yet, we're going to have a credit crunch. And so my argument is that the fear is not nearly so much high inflation, but it's significantly higher interest rates. And it's going to be higher interest rates at a time we don't need it, because even if we have a good 2011 and the first half of 2012 is equally good or maybe even better, we still won't have recovered half of the jobs that we lost. And all of a sudden we're going to be forced to have to raise interest rates substantially. Danger down the road. The other thing that's an unresolved thing. You know, I had great hopes for this country that, as with most recessions, that we learn our lesson. Typically, recessions are painful enough that we learn our lesson, and we at least learn it for a while. An example was that we had the great real estate crash of the early 1990s. It was the S&L crisis. The S&L crisis wreaked havoc throughout most of the United States. Interestingly enough, not in Houston, because Houston's real estate crisis was in the mid-'80s. We'd already been through it, and we didn't need a correction. Most of the rest of the world, the rest of the country had been hurt really, really significantly. And so you would have thought that we'd learned a lesson. And California prices during the early 1990s dropped by about 40%. The worst area in the United States happened to be Honolulu prices. It dropped by over 50%. And that was partly because of the S&L crisis in the U.S. It was also partly because Japan, the economy went in the tubes, and Japan was probably the second most important buyer of real estate in Honolulu at the time. So you would think we would have understood that oftentimes with regards to assets, what goes up must come down. And we did that. We took a moderate view of real estate for a period of about a half a decade. From about 1992 to 1997, Americans were a little skittish, a little cautious, and shopped well with regards to real estate. They bought within their means. But the problem was, they had learned their lesson in the real estate market, but they kind of hadn't really learned their lesson. Because what happened was that they discovered another asset market that looked a lot better than real estate. What was that in the late 90s? Tech stocks. It was the tech stock boom. And we were making so much money in the tech stocks. And our wealth, which was paper wealth, was growing enormously. During the entire tech boom, tech stocks increased sixfold. It would have sure been nice to completely unload the tech stocks in end of 1999 or the very, very early part of 2010, and then gone on a marvelous vacation. But you know, you get caught in these markets and you just the greed builds and you just want to stay in there till the very last moment. And I got a telephone call from a man I didn't have a clue who he was. Just someone that knew me, I guess, maybe from the media, I don't know. And he called me at home and he said, I need your advice desperately. I said, well, what do I do? He says, I've lost, his retirement account was not huge. He had a retirement account of about $450,000. And he had it all invested in tech stocks. And it was, I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like either $176,000 or $178,000. This telephone call was probably sometime in 2002. So what do? I can't take the pain anymore. I've got to get out. And I had to tell him, I'm not in the investment counseling business. You know, I can't tell you what to do. And he begged me. Finally, he said, okay. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Okay? You tell me when you're going to sell your stock, and I'll buy it. That gave him a little encouragement, you know. The other thing that I told him is that I told him my experience. I said I sold 2/3 of my tech stock in 1999, and I said, but I lost some significant amount of money with the third that I kept. But I says, if your portfolio is balanced, and if you've got a lot of cash on hand, when any market goes down, you see both sides of the coin. You see a little pain, but you see a lot of opportunity. Americans just seem not to understand that principle. I don't understand it. And so we jumped from real estate to the stock market, and then we've jumped from the stock market. When the stock market plummeted in 2000, 2001, what did we do? We jumped back into real estate again. And real estate was the darling of most of the past decade. And now everybody's negative on real estate, and what are we doing? Yeah, I found it so interesting. There was an article. This was just pre-Christmas article. It was an article that I picked up on the internet, but it was one of the newswire articles. But the headline was, "Is it about time to buy stocks again?" The stock market was already up 68% off of its low. So, you know, I don't know if we learned as much as we should. And one of the things that we surely have not learned is that we, as a nation, as individuals, you and I, but as a nation as a whole, we need to learn to live